Welcome to the Farming Your Career podcast with host Dr. Aaron L. Albert, where we explore a variety of healthcare and pharmacy-related topics, including career development, healthcare IT, informatics, innovation, entrepreneurship, STEM, women's issues, and more. Farming Your Career podcast is part of the Pharmacy Podcast Network, and Aaron has had the #1 most downloaded episodes of 2016 and 2017 of the entire Pharmacy Podcast Network. Now, here's your host, Dr. Aaron L. Albert.
Welcome to the Pharmacy Podcast. I'm your co-host and focused on your career development, Aaron Albert. More on me over at my website, aaronalbert.com. Today, we are focused on an interesting topic, one that's been all over the business press this year, and that comes down to our unconscious biases, particularly in the arena of hiring and having people join teams for career development. So today, I wanted to focus on a guest that I heard speak at a Healthcare Business Women's Association event over in Europe, in London, actually. She has a fascinating company as well that is really innovative and on the cutting edge of hiring and trying to avoid our unconscious biases when it comes to the hiring process in healthcare and life sciences. Our guest today is Kieran, and she is CEO of Zocket. So give a listen to this. Really interesting data in here, and I hope you find it useful. We are today here with Kieran. Did I get that right, Kieran?
You got it perfectly.
All right, awesome. And she is CEO of a company called Zocket. And I heard about her through Healthcare Business Women's Association. She gave a really fascinating presentation in London. So I wanted to invite her here on the podcast. So Kieran, welcome to the Pharmacy Podcast.
Thank you so much, Aaron. I'm very happy to be here.
So I love to start with the same question with all of our guests in the world of career development, specifically on the podcast. How did you get to where you are today?
Well, I am actually a transplant. I was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I moved to the Netherlands to go to school, to go to university. So I had all my formative years in the States, but I moved actually to study health economics in Maastricht. And while I was in Maastricht, I was singing in a band and fell in love with a guitarist who I actually married and started a family with. And how I ended up in the pharmaceutical, the life sciences industry was actually through a job ad on a university page. And I spent, I think, the first 9 years of my career at one of the largest CROs, the clinical research organizations. And I've always been involved in staffing and resourcing in life sciences. So it's always been a passion to see and to help companies grow and to help people grow within that.
Perfect.
And after leaving large corporate, I had always dreamed to be an entrepreneur. I was lucky enough to start before it was Icon. It was actually a smaller company, and I was allowed to play being an entrepreneur without the risk. But 5 years ago, I started a company together with my best friend, who it's just such a gift, I would say, to be able to do that. And we started a company for life sciences where we do recruitment, so finding people and matching them to companies, as well as helping companies to grow with their expansion to Europe or finding the right business partner to work with. And 1.5 years ago, we started Zocket. So that's, in a nutshell, the career development.
Excellent. And so Zocket, great name. Tell us about it and tell us why you started it.
It actually all started on a train ride with Sabina Hutchison. There's my business partner. And we were working together with biotech and pharma companies and with individuals wanting jobs there. And we really just kept saying there has to be an easier way to bring these people and companies together. Why is there nothing out there with all of the technology we have that just isn't doing the job we believe it could be? So we actually started 1.5 years ago. This train ride was 3 years ago, but we started 1.5 years ago with the birth of Zocket. And we built a platform that's essentially a love child of LinkedIn, eHarmony, and Tinder, with a candidate experience central in that process, rather than automation of the company recruitment process, if you can understand the difference. And it evolved into having expertise on the online candidate experience. So what is the candidate experience while looking at your company or while applying? And we've seen a lot of four different major benefits is that with a platform like this, companies are able to have authentic employer branding rather than the sexy piece that marketing has come up with. Better matches for candidates, and therefore a more efficient recruitment process. We see companies that are able to get a competitive edge in the war for talent. And one thing, how you saw me, was one of the things that we have seen and are really excited about is that it's actually a tool to increase diversity and stimulate gender equality in companies, which I think is a major issue and something that that our generation really needs to make a big difference in.
Yeah, and so this is the whole reason for this podcast. I'm president of the HBA chapter here in Indiana this year, and I've been following HBA globally. And I know you gave a presentation in London, kind of about diversity and gender parity. And so I want to share that with our listeners. So can you talk a little bit about what you talked about in London in that talk?
Of course. So the topic was reducing bias in the hiring process by using technology. And my philosophy behind bias is that it's starting to get a bad rap. So we talk about bias as being a bad thing, but I believe it's really a good thing. It allows us to have a gut feeling about people. And that also saves us from dangerous situations, but it is very active in assessing people, this role of unconscious bias. But as it says, it resides in our unconscious. And if you think about about an iceberg, where the top is the subconscious, that's the piece we can see and change actively. Then you have a subconscious, which is under there. But under that is the unconscious, and that's just not something that we can manipulate with facts and unconscious thought. So utilizing the different technology out there that is growing in size and in strength, is using that technology to influence that unconscious bias, such as blind CV screening, making sure that your text and images online are gender neutral, and making sure that in the hiring process, you are not influenced by gender, not influenced by name, nationality, etc., allows us to speak with a much more diverse candidate pool. We are all very susceptible to hiring mini-me's. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, the mini-me phenomenon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we have a picture of a person who is going to be good at a job, or we have a picture of a person who's going to be a good life partner. And we only allow and review people who match that. When actually, if we, let's say, trick our unconscious to reviewing people with a more diverse background, we teach our unconscious bias that we were wrong. And it gives new data to the unconscious bias, and therefore, over time, much more quickly can evolve our bias to being a lot less mini-me focused.
Well, I know a technique, for example, that has been used in the past recently with a lot of success are symphonies. So they'll put screens up for performances, and, that's not new. But you said some interesting things about how to make your photos and your image gender neutral online. Can you talk more about how to do that?
So from a company's perspective, the bias is not just on the one side. It's not only from a company hiring manager to a candidate. It's also the other way around. When a candidate looks at a company, so when you and I are looking for a new job, we go online and we look at all of the different images that are out there in all of the different social media channels, the website, etc. We look at the people that work there. And when we do that, we paint a picture of what that company is like, who works there, and what is the mini-me that works there the best. And what you can do as a company is make sure that what you are putting out there actually reflects what is inside, and making sure that you're not just focusing and promoting a certain type. And that could be middle-aged white male, Caucasian male, or it could be hipsters with beards. But many companies are just not even conscious about what they're doing there. Candidates, there's some really sad things that happen already now, and I've experienced that myself with candidates and within life sciences who are trying to find a job. at a pharma company who whiten their name. So instead of having a beautiful, authentic, their actual name, they change it to Alan White, for example, in order to get into an interview process. I think that's horrifying. And I think the responsibility sticks with the companies to make sure that they are as inclusive as they can be, especially if they want to change our current gender and non-diverse status.
Yeah, so you have within Zocket Life-Science as a platform within your company. So tell us more about it.
So Zocket is actually evolving the way that candidates and companies are brought together in order to find new jobs. And that can be both for external new candidates as well as for your internal staff. And right now, companies are trying to hire the next generation workforce using old-fashioned processes and tools. And what we've built is actually a platform that is candidate-centric, which means that it considers the candidate journey while looking for the next job rather than the automation of the client's process. And it allows companies to engage, diversify, and retain the best fit talent because we have a matching algorithm internally. It's a blind CV, a CV selection process. And we also consider personality testing, and therefore a culture fit, one of the main feeders into our algorithm. And it suggests jobs to a candidate initially rather than a candidate having to go through the list of all of the open vacancies. The other side of what Zocket does is actually consultancy, specifically on the online candidate experience, in order for companies to identify those gaps before investing any money. In some cases, it can be a fairly simple, non-high implementing process to identify how can you make a more diverse candidate pool apply to your company. So this online candidate experience, which we offer, shows where candidates are lost in that process, where you're actually losing them because of complexity or length. What group are you actually targeting with your employer branding and social media? How biased your online process is. In some cases, it's the words that they use that need to be neutral rather than gender specific, as well as actual candidate feedback on your process. So we have an IT platform and a consultancy all focused on evolving the online candidate experience.
So I got to ask, because I was talking about Tinder earlier this week. Do you get to swipe right or left as a candidate on companies? Oh, dang it.
But I think that there is a future in that. Where I actually think the future is going is that we have some mobile apparatus that will actually be learning about what are your preferences, how much do you move around, what types of people are you interacting with, and it will suggest jobs based on all of that data. And that's the most exciting thing about technology is that it's able to crunch much more data and make quicker decisions to at least suggest, go look at this. For now, no, we don't swipe, but we do one-click application processes. Gone are the days of motivation letters, and I don't know if you know Taleo, but old-fashioned applicant tracking systems that expect a person to spend 30 to 40 minutes even just applying to one job. That needs to change, and therefore the one-click thought process, that's where we've focused on the Tinder, as well as it's very visual. So the company is showing in the platform what is it like to work here, and can show differences in departments, because the finance department is never going to look and feel and smell the same as a marketing department. And that's a good thing. And you want to make sure that your employer branding is focusing on the individuals to join the company and not just, hey, we all play basketball at lunch, because maybe not everyone wants to do that.
Yeah. So I've been a huge proponent of getting more women into leadership positions, as is the HBA. And frankly, at least in the U.S., when you look at leadership in healthcare and life sciences, it's still very white male. So why do you think there is this gender bias, not only in hiring, but then getting to the very top echelons of pharma and life science companies? And how do we fix that?
Well, I think there's two things here. One, as I explained earlier, there's always bias. And there's no way to get rid of that. I think that what I love about one of the things I love about the healthcare is that in all of the diverse industries within, it is a female-dominated workforce. But that's why it's even more striking that the leadership and C-suite are predominantly male and Caucasian. And it has a really slow change because of the mini-me phenomenon, because of how we visualize leaders. Mm-hmm. And we don't just visualize someone with a beating heart. We actually have a picture of them. And since we keep seeing the gray-haired white man, that's what we expect to see again. And we identify others as being token individuals. That needs to change, but I think it's mainly due to this bias. One of the things that I was very inspired actually at the HBA conference was a presentation by Aviva Wittenberg-Cox about the innovative power of inclusion. And she really opened my eyes to see that we are spending way too much time focusing on, let's say, the non-standard groups, so the women and the diverse groups, giving them training, telling them to lean in and be courageous, when actually it's the in-crowd that needs to understand what's going on and how they are biased. If we take that back to high school, the in-crowd and the popular crowd in high school was not calling themselves the in-crowd. They were working really hard to stay part of this group. So it wasn't easy for them either, and it's much more difficult for them to understand why they should include someone else when they're working hard to stay in there. When actually we do need to work on that group to understand what is the benefit, not just the facts, but what is going on. Why are they in a different group than the others? So perhaps just less focused on the fact that we are women, and more focused on the CEOs and the C-suite and the leaders of the companies who really just need to have some insight into what this change means for them as individuals.
So the next question might be a little controversial, but I have ran across this personally, and I've seen it with a lot of my friends as well. So I'll just put it out there, and you can certainly challenge it. But the more educated and successful a man is, the more he's liked. And I think that's why a lot of men get to, the higher echelons, because they're successful. Now, I've witnessed that the converse is actually true for a lot of women. So the more educated and successful a woman is, the less she's liked. So push back on that idea and give us your perspective on that, Kieran.
Well, I don't fully agree with the whole statement because I have not experienced it as much personally either. I think that one of the things is that when people are successful or highly educated, they're put on a pedestal, and many people create distance because of that, because they don't feel the same as that person. And what women tend to do is we like people to like us. So when we're on a pedestal, it's really hard to deal with negative feedback, and it's really hard to deal with the people around us who are not allowing us to be close. Additionally, because I think that women tend to be more chameleons, so like to adapt to their surroundings a lot, and that they are emulating figures of power. So women that behave with a lot of male features, such as dominance, etc., doesn't mean that they were actually that way initially, but they've learned it worked. And therefore, they can become much more stronger versions of who they started out being, which makes it easier to dislike them. When we are seeing someone who is different, we can admire them, but we also do not feel comfortable with them. And I think that may be the case with the male women and success and like and dislike piece, is that there's a distance and we don't feel like they are one of us. And therefore, we start looking at the things that they don't do so well. When, I don't know if that's a male-female thing. I think that that's also our bias that we need to deal with. Successful people all still get up in the morning and put on their pants one leg at a time. Yeah. And they have challenges of their own. They're just easier to point out and to comment on together, making ourselves feel better when they've done something that they shouldn't have. But I believe that it's not just a male-female thing. I think it also is in general, successful people. So in Dutch, you say, high trees catch the most wind. And I think that that's, in this case, the same way, the same thing.
I love that. Yeah. So let's talk about both sides of the hiring process. So what can candidates do, maybe not to reduce bias per se, but at least be aware of it and manage it? And then on the flip side, what can hiring managers do to be aware of hiring or gender bias or diversity issues when hiring candidates? What can we do to make the process better and more equitable?
Okay. Well, let's focus first on the candidate side because it's a completely different advice that I would give. On the candidate side, particularly women, but actually for everyone, is really try to ignore the biased employer branding of a company and apply anyway. If you think that what they do there is interesting, if they have a job that you think is interesting for you, or you've heard good things, apply, try, put yourself out there. Don't assume the 6 million things we assume about a company or a job. Not just can I do it, but also, I only see this type of person, therefore I won't fit in. Try anyway, because most companies just have not spent time on their employer branding and still need to catch up. So ignore that piece and go for it. That's what I would say.
Okay.
For hiring managers, it's a few things. One is, of course, use technology like Zocket, but there are others out there as well, to do multiple things. Reduce bias in your hiring process, but also talk about the issues that companies have internally with the whole diversity and gender equality piece. I don't know if you've heard of Pearson's Law. Pearson's Law is that which measures, which is measured improves. Mm-hmm. So Pearson says if we measure and report it, it improves exponentially. If you think about a sales process, or you have to make 5 deals a day, and that's reduced down to X amount of phone calls a day, people start measuring the number of phone calls a day. It doesn't mean you get more sales. They will meet those call targets. In this case, is the same thing. If we start not just saying, and as an industry or as a society, these are our gender and diversity figures, and that's why they're important, but actually internally start measuring them in the selection process, reporting them to each other, and holding each other accountable, it will improve. But we have to make it internal to each company themselves, talk about it, report it to each other, and hold each other accountable if we're falling behind. That's what I would say. So use tech and measure the things that you want to get better.
Excellent. So, Kieran, where can people connect with you in a way that you would like to be connected with?
Anyway.
Okay.
So we have a website, www.zocket.me. We also have a Twitter account and a Facebook account on Zocket.me. They can also find me on LinkedIn under Zocket or Kieran Canisius. And if you're wondering how to write Zocket, think of a rocket in your pocket, but then starting with a Z. So Zocket.
Awesome. All right. Well, with that, Kieran Canisius, thank you for being part of the Pharmacy Podcast today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
So are you ready for our speed round?
Woohoo! Here we go.
All right. What books are you reading right now?
I'm actually reading 2. One is called Brainfluence by Roger Dooley, and it's about how we make decisions, and that we like to think it's about figures and numbers, but it's actually about a lot more, the relationship and the feeling. And the other one is Radical Collaboration by James Tan and Ronald Loyett, and it's about finding the win-win for everyone. These are both philosophies that I very much enjoy, and it's good to read the theory behind it.
What other podcasts are you listening to?
There's quite a few of those. On the tech side, it's This Week in Tech or Startups for the Rest of Us, because I'm not by nature a techie, so it's good for me to immerse myself in that environment. And I love PBS podcasts as well as TED Radio Hour. They're great for runs and for short, focused amounts of attention to hear what's going on. And then one other thing I'm listening to is Masters of Scale with Reid Hoffman.
Yeah, that's a great one. You're in Amsterdam, so can you describe your healthcare system in one word in the Netherlands?
One word was a challenge.
Yeah.
But I ended up thinking of the one word as being inclusive. One thing I love is it's a very social environment. There's a whole bunch of words I could use here that are not all positive, but I believe that the Dutch healthcare system is very inclusive.
What's the best job seeking advice you ever heard?
That face-to-face interviews are not only about how well you have done, but it's much more about how does the company and the person you're talking to feel to you? Do they feel like home or someone you want to deal with challenges with?
And then last but not least, what's the best career advice you ever received?
That's actually was a good one. It was 2. One was that the career ladder isn't just facing up. This is a roller coaster. That's always really helped me to figure out where I'm going. It doesn't have to be a linear line. And the other one was actually take time to reflect and learn from busy periods, because I kept getting the advice of slow down, and that wasn't working. So taking time to reflect was a really good one for me.
Interesting. So with that, Kieran Canisius of Zocket.me, thank you for being part of the Pharmacy Podcast. We really appreciate your perspectives.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It was great to share here.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Farming Your Career podcast, part of the Pharmacy Podcast Network. If you have ideas or comments for Erin, be sure to contact her through Twitter. Follow her at Erin L. Albert. And remember to keep your career growing.